This episode of The Bachelor is called The Shanae Show, brought to you by Hyundai. Join me for what we can learn in Clayton's fourth episode of his journey to find love. I've got two juicy topics for you. Last week in Rose Therapy, I shared with you my suggestions for how I thought Clayton could be handling his season better. Obviously, he didn't listen to me, so I'm going to try again. And in today's episodes of Rose Therapy, I want to dive deep into two topics. The first you might know about if you've been following me on Instagram and my website, backtolovedoc.com. You know that I am a specialist in attachment styles. It's my jam. What's more important to know that in dating and your relationships, that who you are was set a long time ago. That's right. It's not your ex who caused you to be anxious in your relationship. Blame your parents. And your attachment style isn't something that you can easily see, nor does it come up all the time. It's only under stress, or what we call threat, when your attachment style shows up. But I follow The Bachelor and Bachelornation specifically looking for examples of what to do and what not to do so you can learn. Last season, I had a lot of praise for Michelle because Michelle had a secure attachment style. And as a result, we saw less BS and more discernment from Michelle. But let me break down the four main attachment types so you can understand who they are. And if you want to understand more about this, I have a second Back to Love channel on YouTube, and you can dig deeper into some of those videos. If you haven't already taken my love style quiz, make sure you go to my website and do that now to figure out what style you are. But the four attachment types are 1, secure, 2, what we call anxious ambivalent, or I call nervous, 3, anxious avoidant, I call independent, and 4, fearful avoidant, or I call the confused person. Now, the best situation is to come from a loving family where your parents were attuned to your needs. You felt loved unconditionally. You learned how to trust people. You feel calm in your body, and you can think rationally. Chances are for you, you wouldn't struggle as much in relationships because you're secure. But the next is the anxious ambivalent person. Again, I call nervous. They're the person who has parents who were there for them sometimes, but not others. As a result, your nervous system is sensitive and you're uncertain in your relationships a lot. This type of person is going to overthink things, connect quickly. They're going to be a people pleaser, and they're going to struggle with boundaries. Now, the anxious avoidant, or the independent type, is more detached. They're the more cool person. They might be picky as hell. They hate drama and prefer time spent alone, time to process. The fourth, or the fearful avoidant person, did experience abuse when they were young, and so they are incredibly confused when it comes to relationship. Thank goodness this is a much smaller percentage of people. Now, at the start of dating, people can fake good. I say this because it's important to know that you're not going to be able to know who someone is all the time. In some ways, the analogy is you're like tea. You don't know someone's true flavor or their attachment style until you put them in hot water. And this is why I follow the show, because unlike real world dating, there is a ton of stress. Things move quickly. We see people fall in love quickly, but we also see them crack under pressure. And of those four types, secure, anxious avoidant, or fearful avoidant, who do you think is on the show most? If you guess the anxious type, you're right. Because I've collected data on attachment styles of over 66,000 people. And 46% of women, the largest percent, and 38% of men are the anxious type. You might find it interesting that the anxious type are more likely to go on the show too. Why? Because the anxious person hates being single. They want a relationship. They're more motivated. They fall in love more easily. Again, because they connect quickly. And on the show, that's the goal. So the more anxious person wants a romantic ending too. Now, this is also the reason why we see so much drama, because of all the insecurities. And you better bet the producers stoke the insecurities too. Like, how did you feel that you didn't get a one-on-one? But I thought it might be helpful to review the last few bachelors, and in particular, I want you to start thinking about Clayton. So our last bachelors were Pilot Pete, Matt James, and now Clayton. I usually like to wait to the end before I talk about someone's attachment style, but I've got some hunches already and I want to share those with you. I'm guessing that the producers thought that Clayton was the secure type. Why? Well, because on Michelle's season, he talked about his parents being happily married, that's what he wanted for himself. He wanted children and a family. But the last secure bachelor we had was Sean Lowe, I think. He was one of the original OGs, and they might have thought that they were picking someone like Sean. Now, Clayton looks confident. However, they didn't bargain for Clayton being such a hot mess. Or did they? Because on paper, Clayton looks like a good role model, right? He's big, beefy, a lot of women's type. He has a good job. The women say he checks off all the boxes. And unlike the more avoidant type, Clayton's not a player. But I'm seeing a lot of anxious behavior. Before the limo even starts, he offers Sally a rose, another impulsive, anxious move. Night one, he comes out of the limo. Many times he's talking about how nervous he is. He looks a little awestruck. He's nothing like our cool, calm, collected bachelorette, Michelle. And Clayton doesn't set boundaries from night one. When women interrupt other women, he doesn't stand up for them. Here's the thing. I call Clayton a low expressive type too. On my love style quiz, I differentiate between a high expressive type, a person who talks a lot and handles conflict better, versus a low expressive type. So I think Clayton is an anxious, low expressive type because he is afraid of conflict. Now let me go back to other anxious bachelors. You can't forget, again, Pilot Pete and even Ben Higgins, who was the first bachelor who started the trend of telling multiple women he loved them. But Ben is just like me, shouting to Clayton, don't do that. But Clayton's not listening either. The problem is that by week 4, we should be seeing more clarity from Clayton, more authority. As the lead, he should be asserting himself more, asking harder questions, discerning better. By this point, of course, Michelle had already dealt with the BS. Many of the bachelorettes have more experience, but Clayton seems a little bit like the deer in the headlights. He's not sure how to handle the women. I also guessed, could he also be avoidant? Well, he does shut down easily and he cancels 2 out of the 3 last cocktail parties. But to me, it feels more like the inability to be discerning is more of an anxious tendency for Clayton. He feels naive to me, right? He calls a meeting between Elizabeth and Shanae but expects them to figure out. He doesn't lead the meeting. And hiding from conflict, as a couples therapist, I can definitively say this is not a good long-term relationship skill. Now, it's not all bad, and as I said, it's not that I don't like Clayton. Clayton does some things well. He listens to the women. He responds with more than a thank you for sharing, which we saw with Matt James. I do think he's kind and he's a nice person. Clayton offered Elizabeth a public apology on social media, which speaks to his sensitivity. And he does take ownership, saying that people suffered on his behalf. Now, he tells the women, I wouldn't be like your jerk ex-boyfriend. At least he thinks he wouldn't. But what's missing for me is the ability to see through the BS. And sad but true, as I've said, the women are typically better at this. But when you have an insecure lead, either anxious or avoidant, the cast tends to take over, and we saw the same thing happen in Matt James' season, though I thought Matt James was more the avoidant type. But the producers love this stuff, because if you want to believe the show is about love, then go ahead and think that. But it's really about the drama. Now, my second topic is let's talk about, from last week, how to handle a bully. And if you missed my last segment, definitely go back and watch it, because I identified and talked about what bullying behavior by definition actually is. But at this point, Shanae fits the definition. She's exerting power over Elizabeth and the other women by being intimidating. You don't know what to do or how to handle a bully because they throw you off. And Shanae is a successful bully. Let me tell you why. It's in her delivery and timing. In psychology, we call it temporal continuity. When you want to change a behavior, the consequence needs to be closely timed, okay? Say, for example, you're trying to teach your toddler a skill, and they can't do it quite yet. So you're there trying to coach them, but you say to them, wait till your father comes home, either for the reward or to be talked to. Now, hours later, when your partner comes home, they try to talk to your child. You've missed the exact timing of it, and it's ineffective. Okay, now Shanae, on the other hand, is very direct and swift in her reactions. I'm not saying this is good, but if you cry long enough, people start to believe you. Another theory in psychology we call confirmation bias. Shanae is strategic. She's quick. She's also very specific in her complaints. She gives concrete examples.
You make me uncomfortable. You're toxic. You're fake to me. I walk past you half the time. You don't talk to me. And you have all these girls turning against me because of you. The lying, the bullying, everything you can think of.
And here's where Elizabeth goes wrong. Shanae repeats herself to Clayton. She says things like, Elizabeth lied. She's two-faced. She offered me shrimp, but then she turned the other women against me. Her language is graphic and compelling, but her timing is fast. She says, Clayton, today the women are talking and plotting to get rid of me. She has no filter, but somehow Clayton feels responsible for her and he listens to her. Now, while Elizabeth doesn't stoop to Shanae's level, this is not the best way to manage a bully. When dealing with a bully, take notes. You need to call their bluff, but you need to respond immediately. All right, just take for an example, and I know I'm just armchairing this, but what might have happened if Elizabeth went to Clayton and said, Shanae just called me big. Roll the tape. What if she said, call in Jesse Palmer and say, hey, either bring Clayton in here now for all the women to serve as witnesses, or I'm interrupting the rose ceremony. The same concept applies to the other women. They know something's wrong with Shanae. They plan to band together.
Like, she just knows if she were to act the same way again, it's going to work out in her favor.
And Sierra thinks she's going to be clear to Clayton and says,
we believe that if you had the full story, you wouldn't want somebody like that to be your wife.
But she doesn't lead with graphic details. At least we didn't hear any specific shares here. They're talking more about her character, which is much weaker, less graphic, less specific. And what's missing for me, I know I'm being idealistic and I have the benefit of, watching it, but your best defense with a bully is an offense. And that means you have to be ready. Because the bully preys on your insecurities, and we see Shanae getting to Elizabeth. They get you to wonder, is this true? Do other people think that? And that's where they hook you. But if you can imagine, again, this happens to you at work or someplace else, somebody's bullying you, all you have to say is, ouch! Did I hear you correctly? Did you just say blank? And make it public. Because public shaming is what shuts down the bully. Remember, they're preying on this quiet power they have. And if you flush that out and you turn the tide on them, they can't do that anymore. But the consequences need to closely follow the behavior. Now, let's apply this to Clayton too. Shanae walks in. He says, a better example of how he could have handled it. Shanae, you got dressed up, but these other women won fair and square. You'll have to wait. He wouldn't be reinforcing her feeling special, which is what he's doing now. Now, another example, because I like to just mix it up. What about the other women? They're so frustrated that Shanae has come back. And Sarah comes back to tell them that Shanae's there. What if they all got up and left and went back to the hotel? Maybe Clayton would pay attention then. Because when talk doesn't work, taking action actually does. Now finally, I can't let the producers off the hook because who's responsible for glorifying the bullying? The women do confront Clayton, and we might assume that eventually it makes an impact, because while Shanae gets the producer's rose, usually the villain only lasts till around week 5 or 6. That's the classic Bachelor script, and Shanae is not going to survive this. But the ultimate strategy is to block Shanae from going to Paradise 2. And you know, I'm going to watch the show till the end, but I really want Clayton to step up and be more confident. I'm skeptical about the longevity of any of his relationships, and I've said this about other anxious bachelors too. He has to become more secure, speak up in real time, and learn how to calm his partner down. Those would all be good relationship skills. Clayton is going to have a lot of explaining to do with whomever wins. I only hope he's up for the challenge. But thank you for my analysis of rose therapy. Let me know what you think about attachment styles and how to handle a bully.